You'll want to open to Revelation 10. There's not a whole lot of slides to the slideshow today. My mama is a loud individual, and I told Melanie whenever we were married and the boys started to be born, I'm not going to yell in my house because Mama yelled a lot. I didn't like it. Obviously, I was typically the one that got yelled at, and I didn't like it. I deserved it, but I didn't like it. So we're not going to yell in my house. By the way, if you're wondering, that rule shattered long ago. But we decided, and you need a way to stop whatever they're doing, and I don't want to yell. If you're running to the edge of the boat dock, I need you to stop because I don't want to get wet, and I'm going to. If you fall off, I'm going swimming. You're coming out of that water. Up here, it may be a high wall. You don't want a child to fall off a high wall, or for some reason, you just need them to stop. So a whistle, real sharp, bristly. It's much louder than that, but they stop and they look. Why is Daddy whistling? It's just because I need you to get your. I need to have your attention right now. Whatever you're doing, stop. I need your attention. Now we have a 2-story house, and when you come in downstairs, you have no idea. You can hear the door shut, but you have no idea who just came in. Whether they belong there or not, you don't know. And it really doesn't matter at that moment. There's someone in your house who just came in. And so I modified something that I heard my great-grandfather whistle a long time ago. And when I walk in the door, I whistle. I don't have to yell up the stairs. But if I whistle this, my wife hears the short little tune. Okay, that's my husband. That's down. This is safe. This is okay. I would like to think that she would even go, that's great, he's home. Maybe sometimes. It's the same thing, it's a whistle. But it means something different depending on what your perspective is. The word gospel means, or the word evangelize means to share the good news. That's the good news of the gospel. The definition of the Greek word here has various meanings, but it doesn't specifically and always mean the good news of salvation in Jesus Christ. Sometimes it is a portion or just a part of that message. It is good tidings. It's good news. And so there are several places in Scripture where good news is the word that is used. And there are several places where you see, that's the whole slideshow, where you see the word gospel used. And they don't mean exactly the same thing. But to evangelize is to share good news. It doesn't mean specifically or necessarily to share bad. The problem is you share both. I wasn't sure, I could continue to define the word, but I didn't feel like continuing to define the word would help us to understand the word. And so I want to give us an example of what it means. What kind of good news is it, and how does that work? So that's why we're in Revelation chapter 10. In Revelation chapter 10, what's going on is this. If you have headings in your Bible and you flip back a page or so, you see that there are seals that are being opened, and when the last seal is gotten to, there's trumpets that are being blown, and there are woes that are being proclaimed. Revelation is about imagery. If he says it's a red truck, what do you know it's not? It's not a red truck. So these are all symbols, and there's a discussion of what they mean. The last trumpet that's going to blow is the one that sounds on Judgment Day. And what you find in chapter 10 is there's preparation for that trumpet to blow. There is, when it blows, before that happens, do these things. And so you can track it down, or you can trust me for now that we're talking about the age we live in now. The mighty angel, that is one who has authority, has the power to do what he has been told to do. The angel being a messenger. Wrapped in a cloud is a symbol for having the authority of God, or having the authority of heaven. Rainbow over his head. Rainbows are going to indicate, what does our rainbow currently indicate? The covenant between man and God. And he has this little scroll, and he puts himself in the position to proclaim it to all of mankind with 1 foot in the land and 1 foot on the sea. And he says, you don't know what he says. I don't know what he says. It specifically says that what comes out are these proclamations, similar proclamations or similar things happen when God speaks from Mount Sinai. When God acts, similar things happen: volcanoes, thunderings, eruptions, earthquakes. These are of those things. 7 thunders are what is spoken here. It says in verse 4, seal it up, don't write it down. No one needs to know, or no one specifically knows that. Okay, well, why aren't you told that? First of all, if God doesn't, he told you enough. If he wanted you to know more, you'd know more. If you needed to know this, you would. My own opinion of this is that this is part of that work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, and that whatever is written here is effective for salvation for you, or rather what's not written would be what's effective. Well, what's effective for Mikey may not be effective for me, and what's effective for Jamie may not be effective for Mikey. And so those things are written down. What you do know is this: there will be a judgment day, and that's what comes next. Or that's what will come next. And so he, in verse 6, swears by him who lives forever and ever, who created the heaven and what is in it, and the earth and what is in it, and the sea and what is in it, there would be no more delay. When it's time for judgment, it will be time for judgment. It cannot be stopped or forestalled. But there would be in those days a trumpet call to be sounded by the 7th angel. The mystery of God would be fulfilled, just as he announced to his servants, the prophets. What would be fulfilled? That Jesus would return, that by his word, by his covenant, all mankind would be judged. In that 7th trumpet, you see that. What are we waiting for? If there is, when the trumpet of the Lord shall sound, earth time shall be no more, and the glory of his resurrection share. We would sing that song. We're waiting on the trumpet. We know that judgment happens then, and you can't stop it. Well, that's good news. I'm ready to go home. I want to be, when the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. I'm good with that. But what if you're not good with that? What if that's not good news for you? What if that's going to be a problem? I really want to pay the light bill, but not right now. I need to pay for this, or I need to pay for that, or I need to do this, I need to do that. When the electrician, or when UK man shows up, and he's got that little tag, and he's going to come take your meter off and lock it, you can't stop that anymore. You can't even pay, you can't hand him cash. That's not going to work. The game's over. It is done. And the angel here declares in verses 6 and 7, there's going to be a time when this is done. The bill is due. Will you be able to pay? Verse 8 is where we are, Revelation 10. Then the voice that I had heard from heaven spoke again to me, saying, go, take the scroll that is open in the hand of the angel who is standing on the sea and on the land. The one that says judgment is coming has the scroll, the authority from heaven, how he got there. Verse 9, so I went to the angel and told him to give me the little scroll, and he said, take and eat. It will make your stomach bitter, but in your mouth it'll be sweet as honey. And I took the little scroll out of the hand of the angel, and I ate, and it was sweet as honey in my mouth. But when I had eaten it, my stomach was bitter. This is a twofold message. This is this thing that you're told to proclaim in evangelism. This good news. It's sweet in the mouth. Jesus will save you. That's great. If you eat it, if you take it, if you believe it, if you work with it, if you act on it, if you are saved, There's no sweeter proclamation. Sing to me of heaven. But if you don't, it's bitter to the stomach. It's a beautiful way that this is described, in my opinion. But it can be clouded for us. So it's sweet in the mouth, but bitter in the stomach. So immediately we think of our palate, something that's sweet. We know what honey tastes like. You may have a favorite honey or a favorite kind of tree that you like your bees to make honey from. When the honey is sweet in your mouth, that's great. But immediately you would think of, okay, but something that's not sweet would be bitter. That's not what a bitter stomach is. A bitter stomach is nausea, heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach. Almost all the things that Pepto-Bismol fixes. But it's no good. It affects who you are. On Sunday morning, I eat just a biscuit for breakfast. Because I want to be able to stand up here and not have thickened mucous membranes from milk or dairy. I want to stand here with a calm stomach where I'm not squirming and okay, stand and sing so I can be somewhere else. Just something to settle my stomach so that I can stand up here and not be inhibited by it. Because when your stomach is bitter, when you are nauseous, you don't want to do anything but not be nauseous. It's one of the reasons I don't know why anybody wants to get pregnant. But the stomach is bitter. It hurts my feelings. It is down deep, and there's nothing else that I can do. It's sweet in the mouth, but it's bitter in the stomach. Verse 11, I was told, you must again prophesy about many peoples and nations and languages and kings. This is coming. This trumpet will blow, and judgment will happen. So what you ought to do is proclaim. I would rather it be sweet than bitter. And we'll go through the bitter more. The two witnesses are written down, and I don't really, this one is, it takes quite a bit of time about what the message is here for the two witnesses. But later in chapter 11, in verse 15, you get to the blowing of the actual trumpet. And the seventh angel blew his trumpet, and there were loud voices in heaven saying, the kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever. So you have the blowing of the trumpet, and in that you see proclamation. The end of that proclamation in verse 18, the nations raged, but your wrath came. They couldn't do anything about it. Nobody that was unsaved liked it or wanted it, but they couldn't do anything about it. The nations raged, but your wrath came. And the time for the dead to be judged, or the wrath came, and of that, the time for your dead to be judged, and for the rewarding of the servants. What's listed there is the one that's bitter, and then the one that's sweet. For those who fear your name, both small and great, for destroying the destroyers of the earth. Judgment is sweet for those who are waiting on the Lord to come back, who are in proper relationship with Him, those who have heard, accepted, and have received that good news. Jesus will save and take him up on that offer, but it's bitter. It's visceral. It can't be stopped. The reason that it's so bitter, verse 19, God's temple in heaven was open, and the ark of his covenant was seen within his temple. There were flashes of lightning and rumblings, peals of thunder, an earthquake, and heavy hail. The declarations, again, I said that these are commonly where you find God and him making his declarations. God has used hail in the past. Short answer, it's never good for the people receiving the hail. It's bitter in your stomach because it makes you sick. And it should make you sick. But this doesn't say that the message is what proves one person and the other person. This is the same person. John takes the little scroll, this message, this thing, this good news. He takes it and he himself finds it sweet in his mouth and bitter in his stomach. The saved one, we would like to think that John has been saved. He's been tasked with writing like 4 books of the Bible. 5. Oh, good person. How is it both sweet and bitter? Go a couple of pages forward to Revelation 20. In Revelation 20, you find judgment. You find that another telling, another way that the visions are laid out of how this is done. And at the end of chapter 20, you see that the judgment is happening. And it says there that though death and Hades and those who were thrown into the lake of fire, that is the second death, the lake of fire, if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. And then a man came along later and put chapter 21, verse 1, for the next thought. And I agree, it's a slightly different thought, but they are meant to go together. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. And the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. The sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down from heaven. Okay, so here's the city, the wonderful city of God that we would sing about. But the sea, as it is proclaimed throughout Revelation so far, is the masses of humanity. And yeah, you've got to go back way earlier on in Revelation and see how that proves forward. That is, that the angel has his foot on those with foundation, those of the earth, and those of the sea. Those who have no foundation, but are washed like waves. But they're no more. And so you get to, behold, verse 3, behold, the dwelling place of God is with man, and he will dwell with them. But the thing is, back just a second ago, it said those who weren't saved, those who aren't his people, they went to hell. And we get to a verse that we find so absolutely beautiful. Look at verse 4. Tell me that's not beautiful. That he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain, for the former things have passed away. Why are they crying? What did you just see happen? Your loved one? Your parent? Your spouse? Oh, how great the salvation in Jesus. That is sweet to know that I'm going to heaven. But it should make us absolutely sick to know that others won't. And if we don't have that sickness, we're missing something about the love of God. We're told in Ezekiel chapter 18 where God talks about it's not the Father who's going to pay for the sins of the Son, and it's not the Son who is going to pay for the sins of the Father, but the one whose sins shall die, and that God takes no pleasure whatsoever in having to condemn the sinner because of their sin. But you get what you earn. And it should make us sick. The way that your God sees this, that those who will refuse his salvation will go to hell. And it makes him sick. But it's going to happen. So I brought it up, and I'll circle back around to it. I wonder if that's why morning sickness is part of pregnancy. And I don't know the answer to that. It may just be unfortunate. But we see in the coming of new life, there is something where sickness is involved. It says, remember that we read there at the end of chapter 11 that the temple was open and the ark was seen. And then you read about all of the things that God is doing, but the ark is seen. And the angel earlier, he's identified as having a rainbow over his head. That, again, both signs of covenants from God, pointing out this, that there's not just some random test that God is going to ask for. And there's not some random act that you may or may not do in your life that has effect on your salvation. God has set down rules. He has bound himself to those rules, and that he will save people based off of their accordance or living in accordance with the rules. So that at the beginning and at the end, both there of that scene, it says that. And actually, it says it here in chapter 20. We're not going to spend time there with it. Go with me to Ephesians chapter 2, if you would. Ephesians chapter 2, starting in verse 11. Therefore, remember that at one time you Gentiles in the flesh called the uncircumcision by what is called circumcision, which is made in the flesh by hands. Remember that you were at that time separated from Christ, alienated from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers to the covenants of promise. All of that's a little bit strange if you're not familiar with this medical practice that the Jews did especially. But the point I want you to grab there is what he says there at the end. You were strangers to the covenant. Verse 13, but now in Christ Jesus, you who were once far off, that is those who were strangers of the covenant, have been brought near by the blood of Christ, for he himself is our peace, who has made us both one and has broken down in his flesh the dividing wall of hostility by abolishing the law of commandments expressed in ordinances, that he might create in himself one new man in the place of two, so making peace, and might reconcile us both to God in one body through the cross, thereby killing the hostility. And he came and preached peace to you who were far off, and peace to those who were near. So what is this? He made one instead of two, and what the conversation is this: those who were not part of God's people. He made a way for you to be one of God's people. And the two that are discussed there is you and him. Will you be unified with him? Because if you'll be unified with him, you don't have to be a stranger far off. You can be one of God's people. There's discussion here of laws and ordinances, rules that he's set down. Why? Because he doesn't want you to think that it's some kind of random thing that might happen if swamp gas on Venus aligns with a cricket in a Louisiana swamp, or something weird and random that you have no control over. He says very plainly, these are the rules. Would you like to be saved? And then he came and told you, verse 17, preached peace. Peace. The wrath of God is what's peaceful, or what the peace is received from. As we've read back over in Revelation, there's a great day coming. And so, last book we'll go to is Romans. In Romans chapter 1 and verse 16, we read of that gospel again, that we are to be evangelizers, or preachers of the good news of. For I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes. It is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes. Well, that's good news. You can be saved. But even in the preaching of the salvation, think of Acts chapter 2. If you go back before verse 38, which is where we really do kind of like to start, if you go back before that, nothing positive is said. Nothing positive is said. There's no good news there. You killed Jesus, the Son of God. This is your fault. Go to Acts chapter 7, where Stephen is murdered for his beliefs. He didn't say anything positive at all. You killed Jesus. It's your fault that he died. He doesn't sing to them of heaven. Why do sweet and sour work so well together? Or sweet and salty, rather? Because they show the contrast between each other. It doesn't work for all things, but it does work for some things. And here, you cannot have salvation from something unless there's a something to be saved from. And most commonly, what we see preached is, you need to be saved from the bad, bad thing. If you're not saved, do you know that people will cry for your soul? If you're not saved, do you know that people do care? If you are saved, what are you doing about it? Because if it's making you sick, then your natural answer should be, I need that sickness to stop. I don't like the way this feels, and it needs to stop. I need to have some kind of resolution. But who will you tell? In Romans chapter 10, after discussing that those who call on the name of the Lord will be saved, it says, how will they call on him how will they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how are they to believe in him of whom they have not heard? And how are they to hear without someone preaching? And how are they to preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the good news. We spend an inordinate amount of time inviting people to church. And I say that because I don't find any invitations to church in the New Testament. But I find an awful lot of commands for the disciples to go and to teach where they go. Yes, if you're inviting people to church, that's wonderful, and would love for the truth to be learned here. But the way the gospel is spread is around kitchen tables and in front porches, as we'll discuss next week. The place that the gospel is spread is through your actions, to where they see who you are and the fact that you are sick, that you have a bitterness in your stomach because you have this wonderful, sweet thing that you would love to tell them about the condition of their soul. The invitation song is Will You Not Tell It today, and it's meant to inspire us to go out into this world and spread the good news. Remember this throughout this week as we have opportunity to teach others of the salvation of their Lord, that it's still sweet to us. Because we can lose sight of the fact that it's sweet.